Smoke on the Wall, A Candlemaker's Evening in Paris, 1352. Paris, in the year of our Lord 1352. The air is damp, and twilight rests low over the rooftops like a blanket pulled gently across the city. The Latin Quarter, once filled with murmurs of debate, the clatter of apprentices, and footsteps along worn cobblestones, is beginning to quiet. It does not fall silent all at once. No, Paris fades into stillness the way smoke curls into the eaves, slowly, hesitantly, as if reluctant to leave the day behind. Along Rue Saint-Jacques, the foot traffic thins. A final baker pulls shut his wooden shutters with a groan. A pair of washerwomen hurry past, shawls clutched tightly against the evening chill, the scent of lye and wool trailing faintly behind them. Bells toll softly in the distance, perhaps from Saint-Julien-le-Pauvre or farther across the Seine. Their sound rolls across the rooftops like slow waves, marking time in the ancient rhythm of monks and market stalls. Near the end of a narrow street, a lantern glows behind a crooked windowpane. The glass is uneven, old and bubbled, distorting the soft orange light into strange shapes that flicker across the walls. The light belongs to Yahiel, the candle maker. His shop, if it could be called that, is little more than a wide room beneath a sloping roof, its wooden frame blackened with age. Ivy claws up one side of the stone. The door does not quite close. At its base, a gap wide enough for mice and cold wind lets in the outside world in slivers. Yet to those who pass by, there is something comforting about this light. It is not as bright as the oil lamps used in noble houses, nor as grand as the candelabras that line cathedral altars. But it is steady. Warm. A sign that someone is still awake, working, perhaps thinking, as the rest of the city begins to settle. Inside, the air is warmer, but thick. The scent is unmistakable: melted tallow, aging beeswax, and the faint metallic trace of old iron tools. For those unfamiliar, it might be unpleasant, almost sour, or cloying. But for Yahiel, it is the smell of his craft, his trade, and his place in the world. The room is low-ceilinged and uneven. The floor, made of worn planks, creaks beneath every movement. Against the far wall stands a wide wooden table, burnished by years of use and darkened at one end by a long faded spill of wax. Above it hangs a row of copper pots, blackened underneath but gleaming slightly where they've been wiped clean by cloth and hand. Each is labeled, not with words, but with tiny notches carved into the wood beneath them. One for beeswax. One for animal tallow. One for colored pigments rarely used these days. A stone hearth nestles in the corner, low and soot-streaked. It is not meant for warmth, though it offers some. Its primary task is heat, steady and controllable, to melt, soften, and shape the materials Yahiel works with. And above it all, the walls. They are what most remember. Whitewashed once, long ago, but now stained with rising smoke, the ghosts of thousands of candles that have come and gone. Some stains resemble smudges. Others, vague shapes, a face here, a curl there. Yahiel never scrubs them. To him, they are memory etched in soot. He moves through the room quietly, not with haste but with practiced calm. His robe, made of thick, undyed wool, brushes the edge of a shelf as he passes. In his hand, a small iron rod wrapped in cloth at one end, a tool for stirring wax, lifting molds, and adjusting wicks. It is worn smooth where his fingers have gripped it for years. Tonight, the shop is his alone. There are no customers after dusk. Most have taken what they need earlier in the day: a bundle of rushlights for a tavern, a taper for a scholar's reading desk, a set of altar candles for the church up the hill. Yahiel does not call out to passers-by or hang signs. Those who need him already know. He crouches near the hearth and nudges the coals. They are still warm from the afternoon's work. With a breath and a careful hand, he feeds them small curls of kindling from a basket near his feet. They catch slowly, glowing orange, then deepening into the steady red that signals readiness. He does not speak. There is no need. The fire understands. In one corner of the shop, behind a low shelf, rests a small stool and a wax-streaked ledger. Yahiel will write in it later, not with ink, but with a stylus into the wax itself, as is his habit. He rarely trusts parchment for personal records. Too easy to erase, too tempting to share. But wax? Wax remembers. For now, though, his focus is elsewhere. He retrieves a heavy pot and places it carefully onto the iron trivet above the fire. The pot is half filled with leftover wax, the remains of earlier batches, and he knows it will take time to melt again. Time is no burden here. It is what the work demands. A single candle burns on the table beside him. It is short, nearing its end, and its flame dances slightly in the warm air rising from the hearth. Yahiel glances at it, then smiles faintly. It leans to one side, as if listening. He adjusts the wick with a small iron blade, trimming it just slightly. The flame steadies. Outside, the last rays of light vanish from the narrow street. A cart rolls by, its wheels groaning softly. Then silence. The kind of silence that exists only in certain corners of old cities, where stone and shadow have grown used to one another. Inside the shop, the candle flickers again, not from wind, but from memory. The wax begins to melt slowly, patiently, as it always does. A soft sheen forms across its surface, smooth and golden, catching the flicker of the lone candle nearby. Yahiel stirs it gently, not to speed it along, but to keep it even. If wax is allowed to sit too long, it may form bubbles or crusts along the top, imperfections that ruin the burn. The fire beneath is modest, just enough to warm and liquefy without boiling. There is a quiet pride in this balance, a control built not from force, but from long familiarity. Yahiel has tended these pots for decades. His fingers know the heat without needing to touch. His ears can tell from a whisper of steam whether the wax is ready. His nose, always slightly coated in the scent of smoke and salt fat, can tell the difference between clean beeswax and spoiled tallow before it is even poured. Above the hearth hangs a board fitted with iron nails. From each one dangles a different tool, ladles of varying depth, curved knives, brass rods, strips of cotton wick dried and wound in rings. The board creaks when touched, each tool clinking faintly as if speaking its own tongue. He selects what he needs one by one, with the slow precision of ritual. First, the wick cutters, shears forged by a smith in the marais, the edges kept sharp with whetstone and patience. Then, a flat iron paddle, used to smooth the wax when it cools unevenly along the mold. Finally, a pair of simple wooden tongs, burnished from use, blackened near the tips. They were his father's once, and perhaps his father's before him. Yahiel does not recall when they passed into his hands. Only that they have always been there, like the wax, like the fire, like the quiet that fills the hours after dusk. He sets them all down upon a cloth spread across the table, each one laid in a particular place, a personal geometry of purpose. The cloth is stained, patched, softened over time, but it catches the bits of wax that would otherwise cling to wood or hand. Yahiel has learned that mess multiplies in silence. The cleaner the space, the calmer the work. Behind him, a wooden rack holds the molds. Some are stone, heavy and worn smooth by centuries. Others are iron, their surfaces dark with age, shaped in the likeness of saints or saint symbols, keys, doves, thorns, eyes. A few are plain cylinders, made for the homes of simple folk who ask only for light, not blessing. He runs a finger over one of them. It depicts the Virgin, hands folded, a star etched faintly above her head. The mold is cool to the touch. It will need warming before the wax can be poured. In the far corner of the shop, beside the ledger and stool, rests a small wooden icon. Not ornate, just a carved image of Saint Genevieve, protector of Paris, tucked beside a guttered candle. He does not pray aloud, but he nods to her briefly, out of habit. Time passes in soft movements. The wax melts fully, now a pool of glistening amber. Yahiel ladles it out slowly, filling each mold with care. The surface trembles, then settles. A fine line of steam curls upward from the lip of the pot, vanishing near the beams above. The scent, sweet and faintly earthy, fills the shop. He dips a wick into one of the forms, guiding it down with the paddle so it stays centered. This part must be done without rush. A crooked wick means an uneven burn, and uneven burns mean soot. For a candlemaker, soot is an insult, the failure of purity. Not to the customer, perhaps, but to the candle itself. He speaks then, very softly, not to himself, and not to God. Burn well. Burn clean. Burn long. It is a phrase he says to every batch. A whisper of encouragement. Some men give names to their horses. Yahiel names no candle. But he treats each one as if it might remember his kindness. In the stillness, small sounds grow clear. The wax creaks as it cools in the molds, the fire snaps occasionally. A drop of water hits the stone floor from a leak somewhere in the ceiling, just one drop, spaced long minutes apart. Outside, the city has hushed. The earlier cart is long gone. The bells no longer ring. Only faint echoes remain, a distant voice from an upstairs window, the flutter of a bird shifting on a rooftop. Yahiel barely hears them. He is deep in the rhythm now. He moves from mold to mold, setting each filled form upon the shelf to cool, then preparing the next. His hands do not shake. His breath remains slow. It is not work so much as meditation, the wax flowing where thought would otherwise dwell. On the far wall of the shop, a row of completed candles waits to be boxed, all of them identical in length, shade, and curve. But Yahiel sees the tiny differences. One is slightly thicker near the base. One has a twist in its wick. Another burns with a thin thread of soot, despite his careful trimming. He makes note of each. Some he will sell anyway, to those who will not care. Others he will set aside, melted down later and remade. But none will be wasted. He knows that light, once shaped, must be honored. Even the flawed flame can give warmth, if placed in the right corner. Beneath his table, stored in a small box wrapped in linen, lie the broken ones, candles cracked before curing, wax spoiled by ash or water. He keeps them not out of sentiment, but as reminder. That perfection is fragile. That light begins in pieces. Sometimes, late at night, he melts them again, not to sell, but to watch the wax reform, to see it accept the fire once more. And perhaps, in that small act, there is redemption. Even for wax. Even for men. The wax has quieted in its molds, and Yahiel lets it rest. The fire in the hearth hisses gently now, a patient animal licking at its stones. The candle nearby gives a single soft crackle and then goes still again. In this lull, the pause between batches, Yahiel sits. He eases down onto the stool beside his ledger, his knees stiff from long hours standing. He does not sigh aloud, but the sound is there in the wood as it creaks beneath his weight. His hands, though clean, still carry a faint trace of wax, in the lines of his knuckles, under his nails, and in the shallow scar at the base of his right thumb where he once dropped a full ladle of melted tallow. He stretches his fingers once, twice. Then he looks up. The wall across from him is softly lit by the hearth and a single taper on the worktable. It's enough to show what has returned. There, just above the shelf of drying forms, a dark shape has grown. Not a mark he remembers leaving. Not one of the usual streaks or curls. This one is vertical, long, narrow, like the back of a cloak, or a shadow stepping inward. He stares at it for a moment, not with fear, but with the blank attention of someone watching something they cannot quite name. The stain is new, or seems to be. But then again, shadows here move without haste. They gather slowly, day by day, until they are simply part of the room. Still, he watches. Yahiel has seen shapes in the soot for years. In the curl of smoke above the vent, he once swore he saw a dove. A child once pointed out what looked like a tree. Another claimed to see a woman praying. Yahiel neither agreed nor corrected them. He knew it did not matter what the shape resembled. What mattered was that someone saw something. And yet tonight, this new mark draws his eye again. He tilts his head. It could be anything, a drip from a leaking roof beam, or the remains of steam from the cooling molds rising in strange ways. Perhaps his own mind, softened by the late hour, is filling in more than is there. Still, he stands, walking slowly toward the wall. The boards underfoot groan with each step. The shadow seems to deepen as he approaches, as if the fire behind him feeds its outline. He stops just short of it and places a hand flat against the wall. The plaster is cool. Dry. Rough in some places, smoother in others, where hands or rags have passed. But he does not touch the shape itself. That space he leaves alone. Instead, he draws back his hand and murmurs something, not a prayer, exactly. Just a sound. Low. Wordless. The shadow stays. In the silence that follows, a thought stirs. Old. Almost forgotten. Yahiel remembers a time, some 20 years earlier, when he was still learning the trade under his uncle's watch. The shop then was in a different part of Paris, smaller, darker, with thicker beams and a cellar that never dried fully. He remembers one winter night when the wax would not set properly. The molds bubbled. The wicks curled inward. Every batch spoiled. His uncle cursed under his breath, threw 2 pots into the snow outside, and swore there were ghosts in the walls. Not in jest, not really. The old man had seen a cathedral burn during his childhood. He believed fire remembered. And where it remembered, it left marks. Yahiel had laughed then. Young, skeptical, full of reason. Ghosts, he thought, belonged to priests and superstitions. Now, older, surrounded by flame and shadow, he no longer laughs. He does not call them ghosts. But he no longer calls them nothing. He steps back from the wall. The shape is still there, faint now as his eyes adjust, blending into the soot and old lime wash. Perhaps in the morning it will be gone. Or changed. They often are. He returns to his stool. The ledger waits. He opens it, a thick wooden-bound tablet lined inside with smooth, polished wax. Into it, he carves the day's marks, how many molds filled, how much beeswax used, the temperature of the room at dusk. He records the cost of wick bundles and the number of tallow barrels remaining. His writing is careful, almost calligraphic, though none will ever read it but him. When the numbers are done, he pauses. Below the list, in a space he rarely uses, he etches a simple line. Shape on wall. Resembles man in cloak. Then he closes the ledger, sets the stylus beside it, and folds his hands in his lap. Outside, the air thickens with mist. The lanterns down the alley burn low. The smell of coal smoke drifts from a nearby chimney. Somewhere in the quarter, a dog barks once, then falls silent. Inside, Yahiel listens. The shop is not loud, it never is, but the quiet now feels fuller, as if something is waiting. Not dangerous. Just present. He watches the candle closest to the shape. Its flame is steady, but the wax drips unevenly, one side thinning faster than the other. He'll have to trim it soon. But for now, he simply watches, allowing the light to do what it was made for. To keep back the dark, just enough. The warmth of the fire hums low now. No longer rising in strong flickers, it settles into a steady glow, red beneath the ash, a breathing ember rather than a blaze. Yahiel sits quietly on the stool, his back straight despite the hour. The ledger is closed, the stylus put away, and the molds behind him cool in their rows. The candles he poured earlier have begun to firm, their surfaces taking on the muted sheen of finished wax. He won't move them yet. Better to let them rest overnight, to let the room's chill finish what the fire began. In this quiet hour, not yet midnight, but well past the last bell, the workshop takes on a different feeling. Not eerie, exactly, but enclosed. As though the air itself thickens. As though time folds inward. Yahiel notices it most in the way sound behaves. During the day, footsteps echo. Tools clink. Flames crackle. But now, even the faintest noise, a creaking beam, a shifting chair leg, seems softened, distant, wrapped in the hush of old wood and deeper night. He leans forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees. From this angle, he can just see the lowest shelf by the floor. It holds nothing important, bundles of twine, unused molds, a few clay pots for rushlight stubs. But tucked in the corner, mostly hidden, is a square of wax older than any in the room. A failed candle. One he never burned. It was meant to be a votive, poured for the chapel at Saint Marcel, many years ago. A commission for the feast of Saint Denis, 40 small tapers, no taller than a man's hand, meant to burn in quiet rows along the stone rail. Yahiel had poured the batch carefully. He remembers the beeswax was particularly fine, sent from a monastery in Tours. The color had been like pale honey, and the scent, even before heating, rich with wildflower. But this one, this single candle, had cooled wrong. A fracture down the center. An air bubble beneath the wick. When he touched it, it had cracked in two. He set it aside, annoyed but untroubled. One candle lost out of 40 was no great thing. He meant to melt it down later, add it to a future batch. But somehow, he never did. And it stayed. He reaches down now and lifts it from the shelf. The wax is dusty. Pale. Softer on one side where years of warmth have slightly warped the edge. The crack down its middle remains, a gentle line like a healed wound. He turns it in his hands, slowly, letting his fingers trace its surface. A thought comes to him, not strong, not intrusive, but soft. A kind of wondering. What, he muses, would a candle remember, if it could? Would it hold the memory of the wax it came from, the hive, the field, the sun that warmed the flowers? Would it remember the heat of the fire that melted it? The sound of the ladle? The voice of the one who poured it? Or would it remember only the light, the single purpose for which it was made, even if that purpose was never fulfilled? He places it on the table, beside the small taper still burning. The two candles sit side by side, one glowing, one cold. One fulfilling its duty in gentle flame, the other long past its chance to burn. Yahiel studies them both. The living flame dances quietly. Its shadow on the wall stretches and folds with each subtle movement, long and liquid, like something breathing. It bends toward the broken wax as if in greeting, or perhaps, simply in recognition. Yahiel does not smile, but his expression softens. In the upper corner of the room, a spider moves slowly across a beam. He watches it for a moment, then turns back to the task at hand. Though the candles will stay in their molds for now, the tools must be cleaned. The ladle, the paddle, the wick shears, all bear thin coatings of wax that, if left, will dry hard and flake into future batches. He heats a cloth beside the hearth and begins to wipe each tool in turn. His motions are slow, steady, unhurried. The warmth from the cloth loosens the wax. The cloth itself, already stained and softened from years of use, absorbs it without complaint. There is something peaceful in the cleaning, something almost sacred. Each stroke a release. Each motion a return to readiness. When he finishes, he folds the cloth, lays the tools back onto the board, and steps away. He returns to the stool once more and gazes toward the flame. A memory comes then, unexpected, not urgent, but vivid in its detail. It is of his mother's hand, dipping a thread of wick into wax as she taught him how to begin. She had strong fingers, smooth from labor, and a voice like worn cloth, soft, warm, familiar. He had been no more than 10. The candle she showed him was small, shaped with care, its surface imperfect, yet full of intention. She told him, "The candle's not just for light, child. It watches. It listens. That's why we whisper prayers near it. Not for the saints, for the flame." He had laughed at the time. But even then, he remembered lowering his voice when near the candles, as though they might indeed hear. Now, so many years later, he finds himself whispering without realizing. The flame on the taper wavers, then straightens. Outside, a gust of wind brushes the walls, but it does not enter. The candle stays steady. Inside the shop, the broken candle sits beside its brother, untouched by fire. And Yahiel sits quietly beside them both, as the minutes deepen toward midnight, and the world contracts gently to the glow of a single, steady flame. The hour grows late. In the heart of the Latin Quarter, the city has quieted to little more than breath, the rhythmic exhalation of stone cooling, of shutters creaking gently on worn hinges, of footsteps now long faded beyond hearing. Inside the workshop, Yahiel moves more slowly, though not from fatigue. Rather, the pace of night has caught him, a kind of stillness that seeps into the body like candle smoke into fabric. He knows this rhythm well, has worked by it for decades. The hours after the fire dies, but before sleep arrives, are not dead time. They are listening hours. The molds have cooled. The wax within has firmed to the touch. He will not disturb them yet. It is better to let them set overnight in peace, away from sudden drafts or curious hands. Yahiel crosses the room once more and opens the narrow window just a crack. A ribbon of cool air slips in, damp with the scent of earth and soot, of moss-covered stone and distant rain. Somewhere far off, a single bell tolls. Not a church bell, smaller, fainter. Perhaps a gate closing. Or a prayer whispered by habit. He leans on the window frame a moment, listening. There is no reply but the hum of the night. Turning back, his eyes once again fall on the wall. The soot mark from earlier, the one shaped like a cloak or a figure, remains. Unchanged. No clearer, no fainter. Just present. As if it has always been there. He approaches it slowly. There is no fear in him, only reflection. A quiet recognition that some things simply are. Like the curve of a stone path. Like the wear in the handle of a tool. Like memories that settle into a place not with force, but with time. He stops a short distance from it, hands at his sides. The candle nearby flickers once, no wind, just the breath of wax, and then settles again. Yahiel lowers himself to a small bench nearby. From here, the mark on the wall is neither ominous nor mysterious. It is part of the room now, part of the layers of ash and effort, of heat and history. And beside him, the broken candle still rests. He lifts it again, gently, like something fragile. The crack down the center, so slight and so permanent, catches the light of the taper beside it. He holds the candle at an angle, watching the shadows that fall within its flaw. Then, almost without thinking, he takes the blade he uses for trimming wicks and slices the broken candle in two. A clean cut. Smooth. He holds the two halves for a moment, weighing them. They are cool and solid in his hands. Then he sets them in the melting pot by the hearth. The coals are low now, barely glowing. But they are warm enough. In a few minutes, the wax will soften again, take on new shape, new form. Perhaps a new purpose. Not tonight. But soon. He returns to the taper still burning near the wall. It is short now, near its end. He lifts it with the iron holder and carries it across the room, his steps soft but sure. At the back of the shop, behind a curtain of linen, there is a narrow niche cut into the stone wall. It holds nothing but a shallow plate of fired clay. Into it, Yahiel places the candle. This is where the final flame always rests. He does not extinguish it. It is custom, and his own quiet ritual, to let one candle burn until morning. A gesture, perhaps. Or a ward. Or simply a habit formed in youth and never questioned. He kneels there for a long moment, his eyes close. He breathes slowly. There are no words in his prayer. No list of desires. No begging for fortune or forgiveness. Only presence. Only stillness. Only the awareness of the wax, the warmth, the faint smell of ash on wool. He rises at last. In the glow of the last taper, the room seems softer. The shadows fold deeper into the corners. The tools, cleaned and hung, glint faintly. The molds rest in perfect rows, silent as stones. The figure on the wall is barely visible now, more suggestion than stain. It is enough. Yahiel moves to the door and slides the bolt gently. Not that he expects intrusion. But the lock is less for safety than for conclusion. A way to mark the end of labor. He turns once more toward the center of the room. Then, slowly, he pulls the long wool curtain across the doorway to his small sleeping alcove. The cloth is thick, hand-woven, warm with the scent of lanolin and hearth smoke. Behind it is a cot. A blanket. A place to rest beside the fire. He does not blow out the flame behind the curtain. Instead, he lets the soft orange light shine through the weave, faint and wavering, like the heartbeat of the room. And when he lies down, it is to that light that he turns his face. In the quiet that follows, nothing stirs. The wax cools, the fire rests, the candle on the shelf flickers once, and then holds steady. The city stirs, not with the clamor of daybreak, nor the ringing of bells, nor the rush of carts over stone. No, Paris breathes first in whispers. The curl of chimney smoke. The creak of shutters easing open. The soft slosh of water being carried upstairs in wooden buckets. These are the first movements. Small, precise, unnoticed by most. But to those who rise early, the bakers, the monks, the lamplighters returning home, the hour before dawn is sacred. Yahiel is already awake. In the sleeping alcove behind his shop curtain, the warmth of the cot has faded. The woolen blanket lies folded near his feet. The candle left burning through the night has gone out on its own, the wax pooled and cooled, its purpose complete. He sits on the edge of the cot, rubbing his palms slowly together, warming them. His breath is visible in the cold air. Outside, the world remains pale, caught in the space between shadow and gold. Today is for dipping. Dipping is not glamorous work. It requires no grand molds, no colored waxes or perfumed oils. The candles it produces are not meant for altars or processions. They are for homes. Taverns. Poor men's lanterns. They are short, thick, burn fast. But they are reliable. And above all, necessary. Yahiel dresses in silence, a thick linen tunic with a patched wool overlayer, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Around his waist he ties a strip of leather, worn and stained from long use. It holds a loop for hanging tools and a small pouch with a handful of coins, mostly forgotten. He steps into the workroom and opens the shutters by hand. The first light has not yet reached the walls of the Latin Quarter, but the sky above is softening, from coal to pearl. The buildings across the alley are silhouettes. Pigeons rest in rows along a tile ledge. A cat stretches its back near a stairwell and disappears. The day begins, but slowly. Yahiel breathes it in. The pot for dipping hangs on a hook above the hearth. It is larger than the others, deep, round-bellied, blackened on its sides. He swings it into place and begins feeding the fire beneath with small sticks and curls of bark. The pot will take time to warm, but he is in no rush. From a narrow shelf beside the table, he retrieves a bundle of wicks. They hang in long threads, doubled at one end and knotted in twos, a design passed down through generations. Each pair hangs from a thin rod of wood. He lays them out, careful not to tangle them. The dipping process will take hours. Each candle must be built one layer at a time, dipped, cooled, dipped again, until it reaches the right thickness. Too few dips, and the candle burns too fast. Too many, and the wick becomes buried, choking the flame. Precision lies in rhythm. Yahiel begins to hum. Not a song, not a melody. Just a tone, a low note that matches the heat of the hearth, the pulse of the room. As the wax begins to melt, he prepares the trough of water. This is where the dipped candles will cool between layers, a shallow wooden basin filled from the rain barrel behind the shop. The water is cold, with small flecks of dust and bark floating near the surface. He schemes it with a ladle, as he always does. Then he dips his hands in, slowly, reverently, and lets the chill settle into his skin. He will need his fingers steady and clean. Warm hands can spoil the shape. The cold reminds him to be careful. Steam begins to rise from the wax. A slow shimmer across the surface, like glass softening. He tests it with a wooden stick, swirling once. No bubbles. No lumps. It is ready. The first wick is lifted. The two ends dangle freely from the stick, trembling slightly in the cool air. He lowers them together into the wax. The motion is smooth, practiced, a single downward gesture, no pause, then up again in one breath. The wicks emerge coated in a thin film, barely visible. He lets them hang for a moment, then moves to the water trough. Another dip. A soft hiss. Then back to the drying bar above the table. He repeats the movement, wax, water, air, over and over. Dozens of pairs, dipped in sequence. His feet shift in slow arcs across the same stretch of floor. His body moves in rhythm with the process, neither fast nor slow, simply consistent. This is why it is called the dipping dance, not for beauty. For repetition. For grace found in labor. As the layers build, the wicks thicken. They begin to resemble candles. Not finished, not yet, but forming. Yahiel watches each stage, adjusting pressure and timing with his eyes alone. No sandglass. No measurement. Only feel. Occasionally he pauses to stir the pot. Or to skim away a piece of unmelted wax, left over from an earlier batch. The smell of tallow is strong now, fatty, dense, but it does not offend him. It is the smell of work. Of light in progress. Outside, faint sounds begin to rise, a cough from a window, a door creaking open, a rooster calling from far across the quarter. Inside, Yahiel dips. The fire crackles, the wax flows, and the room fills with the scent of warmth, effort, and memory. The dipping continues. One pair after another, Yahiel lowers the wicks into the molten wax. Then into the cold water. Then up to dry in still air. There is a rhythm to it now, like breathing. Like rowing across a silent lake. The world outside grows slowly brighter, but the light does not enter here fully, not yet. It filters in softly, through crooked shutters and smoky glass, brushing the walls with strokes of ash blue. Yahiel does not pause. His hands move with the wax, his arms rising and falling like a slow tide. The candles begin to show themselves, not finished, but formed, layer by layer. Each dip brings them closer to purpose. He steps back for a moment and looks at the rods above the drying bar. Dozens of pairs now hang in the open air, pale and plump and still glistening with damp. They resemble tiny figures, standing side by side in silence, waiting to be taken out into the world. It's here, in the long hours of dipping, that Yahiel's thoughts begin to wander. Not fast, not sharp, just quietly, gently, the way steam curls upward when no one's watching. He thinks of where these candles might go. One bundle, perhaps, will be purchased by the fishmonger's wife who lives down near the Seine. She comes every 6 days, always with the same coin, always with the same request: give me the ones that burn a bit longer, but not too bright. My husband doesn't like too much light in the morning. Another bundle might go to the midwife in Rue Galland, old Beatrice, with her bent back and her basket of herbs. Yahiel remembers how she came to him last winter, asking for tapers she could light quietly at a birth. Some babies, she'd whispered, don't like to arrive in full light, and perhaps 1 or 2 will end up at the monastery farther up the hill, not for ceremony, but for the monk who tends the chickens. He always burns a candle during Vespers, just one, in a wooden box filled with straw. Says it reminds him of home. Yahiel doesn't know these people well. He's never been to the fish market, never seen a child born, never fed a chicken in his life. And yet, in these moments, he imagines their rooms, the shapes of their windows, the way their tables are arranged. The soft shadows cast on stone walls when the candle is first lit, trembling, stretching, then settling into quiet companionship. He thinks of the moment when his candle is struck for the first time. When flame meets wick. When the wax begins to surrender itself to light. It's a small thing, but it reaches far. Outside the window, the sun has risen above the rooftops. Its rays catch on a patch of frost on the glass, and for a moment the whole shop fills with soft silver. The light doesn't last long, the frost melts quickly, but in that brief pause, everything inside glows. Even the soot-streaked beams, even the old floorboards, even Yahiel's hands, still streaked with drying wax. He doesn't speak. He simply watches the light pass through. Then, as the warmth fades, he returns to his work. More dipping. The wax is slightly thicker now, cooled just enough to hold its shape more quickly. Yahiel adjusts the pace, dipping faster, but still with care. The rods grow heavier in his hands. He pauses again, not from weariness, but to adjust the drying line. He shifts the earlier rods to the far end, making room for the newest batch. The older candles are duller now, no longer shiny, but solid. Ready. He brushes his knuckles gently along one finished taper, testing the weight, the balance. It is smooth. Uniform. He nods once, not in pride, but in quiet confirmation. The candle is as it should be. He returns to the hearth, skimming the pot, stirring slowly, watching for signs of clouding or dust. It reminds him of soup, in a way, the same care, the same stillness needed to keep the heat right, the ingredients balanced. He remembers his sister, many years ago, stirring a pot of barley near the window of their childhood home. She hummed when she cooked, nothing specific, just a tune to keep time with the ladle. Yahiel realizes he is humming now, without knowing when he began. The sound rises above the steam and lingers. More candles. More dipping. And with them, more imagined rooms. A girl reading by the light of a stubby taper, her elbows on a straw mat, a book held too close to her nose. An old priest dozing beside an altar, the candle on the bench beside him still lit, forgotten but faithful. A seamstress finishing the hem of a cloak, her candle flickering against her needle, drawing silver sparks across the thread. Each candle a small witness. Each flame a hush in the corner of someone's life. Yahiel wipes his hands on the cloth at his belt. He stands a moment in the center of the room, listening. There is no sound now but the slow settling of wax, the occasional pop from the hearth, and the faint cry of a gull overhead, lost from the river. The day is fully begun. The streets outside are waking, wheels on cobblestone, voices rising in rhythm. But inside the workshop, time remains slower. More deliberate. Wrapped in warmth and waiting, Yahiel reaches for another rod. The dance continues. The rods are hung now in orderly rows, each one holding its quiet pair of forming candles, dripping faintly into a wide tray below. The smell in the room is rich but no longer heavy, warm wax, faint tallow, a trace of soot. Yahiel stands at the edge of the drying line and lets his eyes soften. He's not looking for flaws now. Only watching. He stretches his fingers, not with urgency, but slowly, thoughtfully. There's a rhythm to rest, too. A way of pausing that keeps the peace of the room intact. He crosses to the door, lifts the latch, and steps outside. The back courtyard is narrow, hemmed in by high stone walls and the leaning backs of neighboring buildings. It holds nothing decorative, just a rain barrel, a bench, a small patch of soil where a few hardy herbs cling to life. But Yahiel loves this place. It is a pocket of quiet behind a world of noise. He breathes in the morning. The air is cold. Clear. No smoke lingers here. No scent of wax. Only the smell of damp wood and stone, and the faint herbal note of mint that has clung to its corner through frost and summer alike. He sits on the bench and lets his shoulders relax. He does not often stop. But when he does, he listens. The shop behind him is still. Inside, the candles rest in their gentle rows, layers cooling, lines straightening with every breath of still air. The heat from the hearth seeps slowly through the wall, warming the wood around the window. And Yahiel, seated here, allows his thoughts to drift toward the things that make a candle more than a flame. The materials, the memory inside them. Wax, first, the cleanest of them all, beeswax, golden, smooth, pure. It comes to him in bricks, sometimes rounded, sometimes flat, with bits of straw still pressed into the underside. He's received some stamped with faint symbols, the mark of a monastery or a merchant's seal. Others come rough and dull, but the wax inside is always good. He can tell by the way it catches light when warmed. Beeswax burns without smoke when trimmed well. Sweet. Warm. Clean. He remembers visiting a beekeeper once, long ago. A stooped man with leathery hands, who moved among the hives without veil or fear. Yahiel had been young then. He remembered the hum in the air, not threatening, not angry, just constant. Like the sound of thought, made living. Wax is the memory of flowers, the beekeeper had said. All those blooms the bees passed through, the wax remembers. Yahiel had never forgotten that. And in quiet moments, when pouring beeswax candles, he sometimes imagined entire fields blooming behind the flame. Then there is tallow. Less elegant. More common. The people who buy tallow candles do not ask for beauty. They ask for light. For warmth. For usefulness. And tallow gives that, if not always gracefully. It comes in large buckets, pale and soft, with a smell that clings to the hands for hours. It is the stuff of animals, rendered from sheep, cows, goats, and it tells its own story. A story of slaughter and fire, of boiling and straining. Of a different kind of work. Tallow cannot be poured the way beeswax is. It must be dipped. Built. Patiently, carefully, with the same hand and the same breath. Yahiel thinks, sometimes, of the animals whose lives become light. Of the fields they grazed. Of the hands that slaughtered them. Of the smoke that rose as the fat was rendered down. Tallow remembers the cold, he murmurs aloud. No one hears. But the words stay in the air a moment longer. And then, the wick, the soul of the candle. The line the fire follows. Wicks are spun cotton, twisted by hand, knotted and stretched. They must be straight. Must not fray. A wick that curls or blooms unevenly leads to soot, to dripping, to chaos. He learned early how to feel a bad wick, not just to see it, but to sense its twist in his fingers. A crooked wick is subtle. It betrays itself only after the wax is set. And then it is too late. Yahiel trims every wick himself. Always. No apprentice is given that task. The wick is the only part that touches both wax and flame, his uncle used to say, it carries the burden. He had nodded solemnly when he heard that as a boy, not because he understood, but because the words felt important. Now, older, he understands. The wick is the path. The story the flame walks. He looks down at his hands. There is wax beneath his nails. A nick on one knuckle where the ladle slipped. His palms smell faintly of fat and ash. But they are steady. Capable. Shaped by repetition. These hands have carried thousands of wicks, melted barrels of tallow, trimmed and poured, dipped and dried. And yet each candle feels new, not because it is unfamiliar, but because it is necessary. A gust of wind moves through the alley. It stirs the mint in its corner. Rustles the edge of the cloth hung over the shop's door. Yahiel watches it pass, then stands. He does not sigh. But he exhales slowly. Then he steps back into the warmth of the shop. Inside, the dipped candles wait. They hang in quiet rows, the wax now matte and cool. He touches one gently. It yields slightly under his thumb, then springs back. Finished. Ready for trimming. He moves toward the table. There is more to do. Always more, but he moves slowly. With care. With memory, because every candle, even the simplest, even the ones dipped in tallow and sold by the dozen, contains something more than light. It contains all the things that made it. Wax. Wick. And what came before. The candles are cool now. Each pair hangs in quiet stillness from its rod, the wax firm and even. The surface, once slick with shine, is now matte, the color of bone or cream, depending on the blend. Yahiel moves slowly along the line, his fingers brushing just beneath each pair, checking for flaws. A dip too shallow. A curve too sharp. A bubble that rose and froze in the wrong place. Most are sound. A few will need reshaping, warmed and dipped again. He sets those aside gently, without frustration. That's simply the way of the work. The rest, perhaps 40 good pairs, are ready for trimming. The trimming knife is old. Its handle is smooth, worn to the shape of his grip. The blade is narrow and fine, made for cutting wick and wax without tearing. He sharpens it each week, using a small stone kept tucked in a cloth near the windowsill. He does not rush this edge. The blade must never pull. He begins. Each candle is held in hand, turned slowly, examined under the light of the window. The base is shaped first, shaved flat to stand without wobble. Then the wick is trimmed, close to the surface, just long enough to catch a flame without dancing too high. Snip, snip, The sound is soft, regular. There's a kind of peace in the repetition. Yahiel settles into the rhythm. Pick up. Turn. Trim. Place down. Pick up. Turn. Trim. Place down. The candles, once cooling in airy rows, are now a line of quiet forms on the workbench. He stacks them side by side in small groups of 6, all with trimmed wicks and smooth bases, each one nearly identical in size. Nearly, but not entirely. There is no true uniformity in handmade things. The slight variation is part of the beauty. One is a bit taller. One leans the smallest degree left. One bears a faint imprint where his thumb pressed in too soon. He lets them be. Perfection is not the goal. Dependability is. The first bundle is finished. He wraps the 6 candles in a square of coarse linen, folding the cloth over their tops and tying it twice with a narrow strip of twine. The knot is simple, but firm. A looped handle is left for carrying, not because he expects his customers to care, but because he does. He places the bundle in a basket near the door. Later, if time allows, he will carry it to the fishmonger's wife himself. Or perhaps her boy will come to fetch it. Either way, the candles will find their place. He turns back to the bench. The second bundle waits. The sun outside climbs higher now. It presses more boldly through the windows, warming the corners of the room, softening the lines of the wood. Yahiel moves his stool closer to the light. He prefers natural daylight for this part of the work, not for sentiment, but for accuracy. Candlelight plays tricks. Sunlight shows the truth. Another pair in his hands. He inspects a faint wrinkle at the midpoint, not a flaw, exactly, but a sign that the wax cooled too fast in the 8th dip. It will still burn well. He lets it pass. Snip, snip. Each cut is final, but gentle, like the pruning of a vine. Not to wound, but to shape. As he works, his mind drifts again. Not far, just softly. He thinks about the purpose of trimming. Not just the practical reason, the neatness, the even burn, but the quiet care behind it. A candle, once trimmed, is ready. It bears no rough edge. No stray wick. It is prepared to become what it was always meant to be. He wonders, sometimes, how many hands will hold these tapers before they are gone. How many fingers will strike flint, or lower a lit match, or breathe gently on a sputtering flame. How many moments, quiet, unseen, will unfold in their company. The final bundle is nearly done. He arranges the last 6 candles and ties them with care. These, he knows, will go to the elderly man with poor eyesight who lives near the edge of the quarter. Yahiel has never been inside his home, but he knows the smell of the man's coat, oil and parchment, and the way his fingers search for the handle of the basket each week. The man always lights 2 candles at once. One to read. One to remember by. Yahiel never asked what he remembers. But he makes sure those candles are always from his best wax. He finishes the knot. The bundle rests gently on the others. Now the workbench is empty, save for the few imperfect tapers set aside. He will not throw them away. Some can be melted down again. Others trimmed and burned in his own shop. Light, after all, is not wasted simply because it doesn't sell. He wipes the bench slowly with a cloth, not scrubbing, just passing over the surface in quiet circles. The wax flecks come away in pale curls. The wood beneath is marked with years of use, knife lines, spills, burn marks, the faint stain of tallow soaked deep. He does not polish them out. They are not messes. They are memory. He stands a moment in the doorway. The trimmed candles rest in their bundles. The pot on the hearth has cooled. The dipping rods hang empty. The room is still. The work is done. Not finished, for work like this never ends, but completed, for now. And in that completion, there is peace. The bundles are ready. 3 neat stacks, wrapped in linen and twine, rest by the doorway. Their shapes are modest, simple parcels, soft at the edges, but they carry a quiet weight. Not from the wax, not from the twine, but from the hours that shaped them. Yahiel stands before them a long moment, hands behind his back. It always feels a little like farewell. Each candle, once gone, becomes part of something else, a dinner, a prayer, a silence. He never sees them again. But he often imagines where they go. He kneels and adjusts one bundle slightly, tucking the knot in tighter. Not out of necessity, the wrapping is secure, but out of a small, habitual care. The kind that needs no reason. Only rhythm. He moves slowly now. The work of the morning is done. In the corner, the dipping pot has cooled. The wax left within has solidified into a pale disk, its surface dull and dimpled. Yahiel scrapes it loose with a flat spoon and sets it into a cloth-lined box. Tomorrow, he will reheat it. Perhaps mix it with a pinch of resin. Perhaps add new tallow. It depends on the orders. Wax remembers what it's been, but it is patient with change. He wipes the pot clean with a coarse cloth, one stained by years of soot and heat. The scent lingers, not unpleasant, but earthy, honest. He sets the cloth aside, folds the apron at his waist, and places it gently on the stool. The room is quiet again. Yahiel walks to the far window and opens it fully. The light outside is pale but clear, early afternoon. The rooftops shimmer faintly with warming tiles. Across the alley, a woman hangs a rug over a rail. A boy tosses scraps to birds near the gutter. A small dog watches all of it with patient eyes. Yahiel rests his hands on the sill and leans forward. There is something strange, he thinks, about making light, and never seeing where it lands. He doesn't mean it with sorrow. Only a kind of wondering. A candle leaves the shop. Someone lights it. It casts a glow on a wall, or across a page, or through the eyes of a waking child, and he will never see any of it. Still, it is enough to know it happens. He thinks again of the old man with poor sight. The one who lights 2 candles, one to read, one to remember. He imagines the man's small room, a table, a chair, a low shelf. One candle near a book. The other near a photograph, or a name carved in stone, or nothing at all. Perhaps he remembers someone who once read beside him. Perhaps he remembers a place. Or perhaps he simply remembers what it is to see clearly. Light, Yahiel knows, doesn't need an audience. It just needs somewhere to fall. He closes the window gently, returns to the bundles. Lifts the first and places it into a wide wicker basket near the door. The second follows. The third. Their weight presses softly against the bottom of the basket, shifting with the balance of the twine handles. He drapes a cloth over the top, to protect them from soot, from rain, from careless glances. It's time to deliver. But there is no need to rush. He lights a small taper from the hearth, not one of the new ones, but an old end from yesterday's pile. The wick catches easily. The flame rises steady. He places it in a holder near the door. It will stay lit until he returns, a small sign that the workshop is still awake. He steps outside, into the narrow lane. The air is cool on his face, the light filtering softly between chimneys and cloth lines. The cobblestones are dry for now, though a dark cloud rests on the horizon. He tucks the basket close to his chest. As he walks, the candles shift gently with his pace. He knows this route by heart: 5 turns to the market, 2 more to the old man's quarter, a final loop past the butcher's lane where Beatrice sometimes waits with her herbs. Each step feels slow, deliberate, like the dipping, like the trimming, like the soft letting go of a flame into the world. He does not speak to those he passes, but he nods, once, to the boy chasing birds, and again, to the woman shaking the rug. And when he reaches the edge of the lane, where the market noise hums just beyond hearing, he pauses. Not because he is tired, but because this moment between making and giving, is the gentlest part of all. He breathes in. Then he begins again. The light has changed. It happens slowly, as it always does, not with drama, not with sudden dark, but with the soft fade of warmth from the edges of things. The sun, now low over the rooftops, slips sideways into the street, casting long, golden shadows across the stone. Inside the candle shop, the flame in the holder near the door is beginning to tremble. Its wick leans, softened by the hours, and the wax has pooled deep in its basin. Yahiel notices without needing to look. The light falls differently on the wall when evening comes, longer, thinner, more angled, like a hand reaching for something it cannot quite grasp. He stands behind the workbench, hands wrapped around a cup of warm wine. He has not yet removed his coat. The deliveries are complete. The street has quieted again. The basket rests near the window, now empty but for a few errant strands of twine and a faint smell of tallow. And he is thinking of nothing in particular, just the softness of the room, the hum of a long day, settling into stillness. He does not expect visitors at this hour. The door is unbolted, not for business, but out of habit. Few pass by in the evening. Fewer still have reason to knock. The shop is not a place of conversation. It is not where people come to gossip, or boast, or weep. It is a place for work, and work, he knows, can be sacred if left undisturbed. So when the shadow falls beneath the crack in the door, he pauses mid-sip. Not startled, not alarmed, just curious. He sets the cup aside and waits. The knock, when it comes, is soft. Once. Then again, a little firmer. Knuckles on wood. Hesitant. A voice follows, muted by the door, low and uncertain. Is this the candlemaker? Yahiel steps forward and opens the door. The woman who stands there is wrapped in a deep blue cloak, its hem dark with the dust of the street. Her face is partially hidden by the hood, but her posture is upright. Not afraid. Not bold. Just, present. A girl, no, not quite, a young woman, perhaps no older than 20. She carries nothing in her hands. No basket. No pouch. Only the faint imprint of gloves once worn and removed. I'm sorry, she says quickly, as if unsure. I know it's late. Yahiel steps back and holds the door wide. She hesitates, then enters without a word. The candlemaker's shop greets her with warmth, not from speech, but from scent. The lingering wax. The earth-toned wood. The faint trace of herbs from the courtyard. She breathes it in like someone remembering something. Yahiel closes the door gently behind her. He does not ask her name. She does not offer it. He gestures to the stool near the hearth. She sits without fuss, drawing the cloak tighter around her legs. The candle near the door flickers low. Yahiel crosses the room and relights it with a taper from the hearth. The flame steadies once more. Then he returns to the workbench. He waits. I was told you work quietly, she says at last. Her voice is soft, with a lilt of something northern in it. Not Parisian. But not unfamiliar. Yahiel nods once. I need candles, she adds, but not for light. She watches him to see if he'll speak. He doesn't. Instead, he takes a fresh piece of linen from a shelf, lays it gently on the bench, and begins folding it into a square. His hands move without sound. I mean, she tries again, not for reading. Or sewing. Or prayer. Yahiel folds the corners of the cloth and ties a knot. Still silent. Not impatient. The girl breathes once through her nose. I need them for remembering. There is something in her voice now, not sorrow, but weight. She does not explain. And Yahiel does not ask. He turns to the shelf and takes down a narrow box. Inside are 3 beeswax tapers, slim, elegant, each with a perfectly trimmed wick. He lifts one gently and places it on the folded cloth. The woman leans forward slightly. Her hands stay on her lap. "That one," she says quietly, "feels right." He places another beside it. Then a third. She studies them. Then, without looking at him, she says, "Will they last the night?" Yahiel nods once. "If trimmed," he says. It is the first word he has spoken. The girl blinks, then offers the faintest smile. She draws a coin from the fold of her cloak and lays it beside the candles. Not much, but enough. Yahiel does not count it. He wraps the 3 tapers in linen, folds the corners gently, and ties them with twine. When he hands them to her, her fingers brush his, cold, slightly trembling, but certain. "Thank you," she says. He nods again. She turns to the door, then pauses with her hand on the latch. For a moment, Yahiel wonders if she will speak again. She doesn't. Instead, she opens the door and steps out into the street, vanishing into the lengthening dusk. He closes the door slowly. The candle on the wall dances once, disturbed by the draft, then settles. In the silence that follows, Yahiel returns to the bench and sits with his cup of warm wine. He does not drink. He simply watches the light. He does not know who she is, but he knows what she asked for. Candles, not for seeing, but for remembering. And perhaps, he thinks, that is the oldest light of all. The air is different now. Not colder, not heavier, but marked, in the way still water is marked by a single ripple. The woman is gone. The door is closed. The light has returned to its quiet rhythm. Yet something in the room feels shifted, however slightly. Yahiel does not try to name it. He simply sets down his cup and reaches for the broom. The sweeping begins in the farthest corner. It always does. Not for any practical reason, but because he has learned that beginning at the edge helps the rest fall into place. His broom is handmade, willow bristles bound with waxed twine, its handle slightly curved from years of use. He moves it gently across the floor. No rush. No force. Wax crumbs gather in small curls, pale against the dark wood. Tiny threads of wick. A pin. A scrap of twine. The shop is never truly dirty. But it collects time, and time must be swept away, now and then. He moves around the workbench, past the dipping pot, now cooled and empty. Past the basket by the door. Past the drying rack with its bare rods. With each slow stroke, the day recedes further into stillness. Outside the window, the dusk thickens into evening. A lantern flares to life across the street. Somewhere, a church bell rings the hour, soft, slow, almost swallowed by the city's belly. Yahiel does not pause. But his hands loosen slightly on the broom handle. It is the kind of hour when the body remembers itself. The weight of the day. The rhythm of breath. The ache in the knees. The warmth of the hearth, imagined even before it's lit. He finishes the sweeping with a last slow circle near the hearth. Then he kneels, lifts the corner of the stone tray, and gathers the crumbs into a small wooden box. Nothing is thrown away. Old wax can be melted again. Bits of wick can be tied into bundles for kindling. Even dust, in the right hands, has uses. The broom is placed back on its peg. The floor is still. Soft. Ready for tomorrow. But tonight is not done. He crosses to the supply shelf. The molds sit there in orderly rows, some metal, some clay, one or two carved from thick wood. They are old, but sturdy. Most are for poured candles, not dipped. He hasn't used them in weeks. But tonight, something tells him to clean and ready them, perhaps for no reason, perhaps because of the visitor. He takes them down one by one, sets them on the bench, and begins the careful task of wiping each with a cloth soaked in warm water and vinegar. The scent is sharp, but clean. The molds are heavy in hand. He inspects the seams. Rubs away the old wax. Turns each one toward the flickering candlelight to see its edges. It is not exciting work, but it is peaceful. His mind returns, gently, to the girl. She did not give her name. She did not explain what she was remembering. She simply chose her candles and spoke as if she had walked through silence to find them. Yahiel wonders what room will hold those tapers tonight. He imagines a windowsill. A table. A scarf laid out with care. Perhaps a drawing tucked beneath a jar. Perhaps nothing at all, just light, and shadow, and thought. He does not imagine her crying. It is not that kind of sorrow. If it is sorrow at all, he polishes the last mold and sets it aside. Then begins sorting wick lengths into a small box, short ones for votives, longer ones for tapers. He keeps them neatly arranged by thickness. It's a habit passed down from his uncle, who used to say, "The wick will forget its shape if the shelf forgets its order." Yahiel used to smile at that. Now, he believes it. Small rituals matter, especially when no one is watching. The candle near the door has burned low. He rises and trims the wick with a narrow blade. The flame stutters, then steadies, casting a warm ellipse of light onto the floor. The shadows behind the workbench deepen, curling gently around the edges of the room. Outside, the street has faded to quiet. The sounds now are softened, the occasional wheel on stone, the clack of a boot heel, the low hush of wind between shutters. Yahiel places the wick box back on its shelf. The shop is almost ready for night. He lights one more candle. Not out of need, out of presence. It is a habit now, lighting a second flame before closing the shutters, letting the two lights speak to each other in silence. They balance the room. One near the door, one near the hearth. A quiet symmetry. He watches them a moment. Their flickers do not match, but they seem to listen to one another. Then he moves to the window. Outside, the sky is deepening. Not fully dark yet, that velvet hour between colors, when blue becomes gray and gray becomes ink. He closes the shutters gently, hooks them into place, and leans for a moment against the sill. His hands are still, his breath slow. The shop, at last, is quiet, but even in that quiet, he feels her presence still, not as a weight, but as a thread. A reminder that the light he makes does not end at the flame. It travels, and sometimes, it comes back in the form of a knock on the door. The shutters are closed. The candles burn low but steady, one near the hearth, one near the door. The room is calm now, folded into itself. Outside, the night has deepened. But inside, time has thinned to silence. Yahiel stands beside the hearth. He lifts the iron pot from its hook and sets it on a stone trivet. Inside, lentils, softened with time. A scrap of onion. Bits of carrot. Salt. A bay leaf. Nothing rich, but enough to hold the body steady through evening. He adds a little water from a jar and stirs. The smell rises, earthy, familiar. He breathes it in, and lets memory rise with it. His uncle used to make stews like this, not out of poverty, but rhythm. He believed in food that simmered, food that changed shape slowly. There was no use, he'd said once, in meals that arrived in haste. Let the food wait for you, he'd murmured, and it'll taste of patience. Yahiel had not understood that as a boy. Now he does. He stirs the pot once more, then lifts a wooden bowl from the shelf. He rinses it with warm water, wipes it with the corner of his apron, and sets it beside the hearth. The spoon is carved from olive wood. His uncle's spoon. He runs a thumb along its edge and feels the worn spot, where fingers before his had pressed down across decades of use. He sits, not on the work stool, but on the wide bench near the hearth, the one worn smooth with years of small rests and slow meals. The bowl of stew rests warm in his hands. He doesn't rush. Each bite is small. Each chew unhurried. The candlelight dances faintly along the surface of the broth. Steam curls upward and disappears into the dark above. There are no other sounds now but the settling of the fire, the occasional pop of cooling wax, and the soft rhythm of his own breath. He remembers the first evening he ever ate stew here, in this room, years ago, just after his uncle died. The shop had been too quiet then. Every corner had echoed. The silence was not peaceful, it was empty. He had made stew that night because he didn't know what else to do. He had stirred the pot without knowing why, sat in the same seat without meaning to, and eaten every spoonful without tasting it. But even in his grief, the ritual had anchored him. The wax still cooled in its trays. The wicks still curled in their box. The stew had still warmed his chest. He had not cried that night, but he had lit a candle for the first time without guidance, and it had burned clean. Now, all these years later, the room holds him differently, not as a boy, but as the one who tends the quiet. He eats slowly, finishes the bowl, wipes it clean with the heel of some old bread, and drinks the last of the warm water from the clay jug. No toast. No words, but something like a blessing lingers in the warmth. He returns the bowl to the shelf, the spoon, too. Then he leans against the edge of the workbench and listens to the soft whisper of the two burning candles. One for the door, one for the fire, one for the leaving, one for what remains. His uncle used to say that. He didn't explain it. Yahiel never asked. Now he recites it softly under his breath, not for understanding, but for presence. The words are a shape he can hold, like wax, like wood, like flame. He checks the locks. The shutters hold firm. The tools are clean and in place. The molds are stacked. The broom is pegged. The dipping rods rest quietly along the wall. All is as it should be, and yet, he glances toward the door. There's no knock. No second visit. No returning footsteps in the lane. Still, he feels her presence echoing gently in the grain of the floor, in the spot where she sat, in the small crease her cloak left on the stool. He doesn't try to name the feeling. It isn't love. It isn't loss. It's something softer. Lighter, like the final curve of smoke before it vanishes. He trims the wick of the candle by the door. Snip. It flares, then settles again. The flame bends, slightly, toward the wall, as if looking back at something, or someone. The shop is quiet now. The floor swept, the pots scrubbed, the shutters locked. The candles near the hearth and door burn low, casting long shadows that dance along the ceiling beams. Outside, Paris has fallen into its deeper hush, a hush layered not with silence, but with softness. Footsteps turn to echoes, voices to murmurs, motion to memory. Yahiel kneels beside the old bench near the hearth. There is a box beneath it. Always has been. Its lid is warped from heat and time, the hinges rusted slightly at the edges. He does not open it often. Not out of reverence, but because what it holds rarely changes. Still, tonight feels different. Tonight, the box calls softly from under the bench, not urgently, but like a name remembered after forgetting. He slides it out into the candlelight. The lid creaks as it opens. Inside, old tools. Carved handles. Iron tongs. A wick trimmer with a broken spring. Two small wooden molds for votive lights. A folded scrap of beeswax cloth. A leather pouch, cracked with age. A spool of thread, half used. The scent is familiar. Faint wax, smoke, and oil. A scent of work long finished. These were his uncle's, left as they were. Used, useful, and loved. Yahiel rests his hand on the edge of the box for a moment, letting the cool of the wood pass into his palm. Then he begins lifting the objects, one by one, not to use, but to remember. The wick trimmer was the first tool his uncle taught him to handle. He remembers the lesson, not in detail, but in sensation. the warmth of the shop, the stillness of the afternoon. His own young fingers fumbling at the hinge while his uncle watched, patient and silent. "You learn by doing," he had said, "but you understand by watching." Yahiel turns the trimmer in his hand. The spring still sticks. He smiles faintly. At the bottom of the box, beneath a folded rag, he finds something unfamiliar. A small bundle of linen, tied with string, too clean to be old, but not new either. It's tucked deep, behind a waxed board. Tucked deliberately. He lifts it gently, unties the string, unfolds the cloth. Inside, a bundle of wicks. Not ordinary lengths, but thin, fine cords, dyed a pale shade of blue, coiled carefully like thread. There's a note beside them, scrawled in faded ink. He unfolds the paper. The handwriting is his uncle's, not a letter. Just a line, "For remembrance. Burn when the room is too quiet." Yahiel reads it twice, then holds the paper to his chest for a long moment. He did not know these existed. His uncle had never spoken of blue wicks, never mentioned anything for remembrance. Yahiel had assumed he knew every trick, every mixture, every quiet detail of his trade. But perhaps not. Perhaps there are always things left untold, not for secrecy, but because some knowledge waits until it's needed. He looks down at the wicks. They are beautiful, in their own plain way. Twisted fine. Balanced. The blue color almost gone in the dim light, like the memory of color rather than color itself. He could burn one now, but he doesn't. Not yet. Instead, he folds the cloth gently, reties the string, and places the bundle back in the box, not hidden, but near the top. He will wait, for the night when the room is too quiet, for the evening that asks for a different kind of light. Tonight is not that night, but it may be soon. He replaces the tools carefully, each in its place. Each turned just so. He closes the lid and slides the box beneath the bench again. The floor creaks softly beneath his knees as he stands. The candle by the door gutters once. He walks over, trims its wick with the newer trimmer, the one he uses daily, and relights it from the hearth. The flame steadies. The room brightens, just a little. He sits on the bench again. The note is still in his hand. For remembrance. He sets it beside him, flat on the wood, then leans back and watches the two flames, one near, one far. They flicker differently now. Or maybe he just sees them more clearly. Outside, wind stirs gently through the alley. The faintest scent of rain touches the windowpane. Yahiel does not move to open it. He lets it remain, the world out there, the shop in here, separated by glass and time. He rests his hands in his lap. The room holds him, not with stillness, but with quiet company. The company of tools, of tasks, of memory wrapped in cloth, of blue wicks waiting in a box. The candles are still burning. They lean now, ever so slightly, not from wind, not from haste, but from the slow passage of hours. The one near the door flickers toward the shuttered window. The one near the hearth glows with steady warmth. Yahiel watches them both. He is not tired in the way of aching limbs or heavy eyes, but in the way that means the day is done. He moves through the room slowly, as though walking through water. Each step careful. Measured. He lifts the spent taper from the holder, sets it on a small dish. It has curled at the base, the wick now ash. He does not sweep it away. Not yet. It deserves a little more time. He takes the oilcloth from its hook by the door and folds it twice. His coat is hung on the peg beside it. The lantern for travel remains dark tonight. There's nowhere he needs to go, and still, part of him feels as if something has already left, or is just about to. He climbs the steps to the loft above the shop, a narrow space beneath the beams, barely tall enough to stand. The bed is simple. A straw mattress, a folded quilt, a pillow he restuffed last spring with herbs and linen. The scent of lavender and thyme lingers faintly, warmed by the roof's stored heat. He lights no flame up here. The 2 candles below offer enough glow to brush against the rafters. Their presence is like breath in another room, sensed more than seen. He sits on the edge of the bed, and waits, not for anything specific, just for the mind to slow, for the air to settle, for the quiet to feel earned. He runs a hand along the edge of the quilt, thumb catching in the same snag of thread it always finds. A small, familiar imperfection. Outside, somewhere far, a cart rolls by. A child calls out in laughter, then fades into the dark. Yahiel closes his eyes. He thinks of the candles now, the ones wrapped and delivered earlier. The fishmonger's wife, perhaps slicing onions by flickering light. The elderly man, bent over a book, or simply staring at the flame. A merchant eating alone in a back room, his plate half empty, eyes distant. And the girl, the one with the blue cloak. He does not know her name. He will likely never see her again. But he pictures her room nonetheless. Stone walls, a table, 3 candles lined like sentinels. One for remembering. One for release. One for something unnamed. He wonders if she's lit them yet, if they've begun to burn down, if the wax is pooling gently along their base, just as it should. It is a strange kind of work, he thinks, to make something that lives its whole life in quiet disappearance. Each candle is meant to vanish, to melt, to be used, and yet, that is where its meaning lies. A candle that never burns is just a shape, it becomes light only by ending. He lies back, arms folded behind his head. The beams above him creak faintly, the old wood settling in for the night. Somewhere in the shop, the candle on the hearth lets out a soft hiss. Wax meeting wick. Heat meeting rest. Yahiel breathes in, and lets the thought come gently, that maybe he, too, is a kind of wick, a quiet bearer of small light, never the flame itself, but the thing that holds it. He does not reach to snuff the candles, he will let them burn, let them end, let them leave behind what light they can. Sleep does not come suddenly, but it comes, and with it, the thought that somewhere, in some quiet room, someone else is watching a candle flicker, and remembering something, or someone, or perhaps nothing at all, just letting the light be, as it is, as it goes. The rain has come, not loudly, not in the thunderous way of storms, but gently, like a long-held breath released across the rooftops. It taps softly against the shutters. Trickles down stone. Pools in the alley below with slow, silent ripples. Yahiel wakes to the sound of it, not with a start, nor with urgency, just a gradual opening of his eyes to the hush of water, the softened world. He does not move at first. The loft is still dim, lit only by what little gray light filters through the shutter slats. The pillow is warm beneath his cheek, the quilt tucked beneath his chin. He lies on his side, facing the wall, his breath calm and even. The kind of morning, he thinks, that asks for slowness. So he gives it. A long moment passes before he shifts. He sits up gradually, rubbing his hands together, listening. The shop below is quiet. No footsteps on the street. No wheels. No voices. The world, it seems, is wrapped in a damp woolen stillness. The scent of rain reaches him, earthy, moss-soft, clean. He breathes it in. It reminds him of early spring in the countryside, when the ground is soft enough to plant, and the air still carries the chill of the hills. But this is Paris. And the rain here tastes of stone and chimney soot and time. Still, it is welcome. It keeps the fire in the hearth burning a little longer. It makes the wax set smoother. And it keeps people indoors, away from the shop, away from urgency. Yahiel stands, stretches slowly, and descends the stairs barefoot. His steps are soft on the wood. The candles from last night are long burned out. Their stubs rest in the holders like spent seeds. He does not clean them yet. He lets them sit, silent marks of yesterday, not ready to be swept away. The shop is dim, but not dark. He does not rush to light a flame. Instead, he walks to the door and opens it slightly, just enough to smell the morning. Rain patters steadily in the alley. The cobbles are wet, slick with shallow puddles. Water drips from eaves and gutter pipes, runs in thin threads along the stone. The sky above is a sheet of soft pewter. No blue. No break in the clouds. A cat picks its way along the edge of a low wall, tail flicking as it steps over a rain-slick tile. Somewhere, a shutter creaks open and closes again. Everything is quiet, but not still. Yahiel closes the door and moves to the hearth. He rebuilds the fire gently, from embers, from dry twigs stacked in a cloth-lined basket, from yesterday's wick trimmings tied in a bundle. The flame catches with a whisper, not a flare. He adds a small log and sets the kettle on the hook above it. Soon, the water will boil, and tea will follow. He lights a taper, the first of the day, and carries it to the workbench. The wax will need warming, and the molds, drying. The day's work begins not with dipping, but with tending. He selects 3 candle molds from the shelf, ones he cleaned the night before, and wipes their insides once more with a soft cloth. The rain has drawn moisture into the air. Even indoors, the wood swells slightly. A damp mold makes wax slip where it should cling. Each motion is slow, practiced, measured, as if the morning itself were whispering, there is no need to hurry. He sets out the wax, beeswax today, pale yellow, still carrying the scent of flowers from months ago. He breaks it into pieces and places them in a copper pot. The pot goes into the double boiler near the hearth, where heat will rise slowly and melt the wax without burning it. He stirs once with a wooden spoon, then leaves it to warm. He pours himself a cup of tea, sits, and listens to the rain. It is a morning of simple things. The clink of spoon against clay, the creak of wood beneath his stool, the whisper of rain along the shutter's edge, and in all of it, a quiet sort of joy. The joy that comes not from excitement, or accomplishment, or surprise, but from rhythm, from knowing what to do, and when to do it, and how it will feel beneath the hands. Yahiel sips his tea slowly, letting the steam rise past his face. The warmth seeps into his chest, settling him. Outside, the alley is empty still. He wonders if the girl from yesterday lit her candles in this same hush, if the tapers he made now glow in another quiet room, in another quiet life. He does not know. He does not need to. The wax here melts. The mold waits. The morning unfolds like silk in water, unhurried, unspoiled, unseen. The wax is nearly ready. Yahiel leans slightly forward, his eyes level with the rim of the copper pot, watching the golden surface shift and shine with the faintest movement. It has melted clean, no lumps, no clouding. The scent has risen with it, soft, warm, familiar. Beeswax and firewood. The perfume of quiet work. He stirs once, slowly. The wooden spoon circles the pot with care, pressing once at the edge, loosening the final fragments of unmelted wax that cling to the side. Outside, the rain continues. It has changed slightly, a little steadier now, less scattered. Yahiel listens to it as he stirs. The sound against the shutters is like fingers drumming softly on a drum skin. Each drop a note. Each pattern brief and new. He finishes the stir, wipes the spoon clean with a cloth, and breathes. The molds are laid out on the workbench, resting in a row. 3 of them today, enough for 6 tapers, tall and slender, the kind used in quiet corners or beside bed frames. He touches each mold once before beginning, fingertips against the cool metal, as if asking permission. Then, with steady hands, he lifts the ladle. The pour must be slow, not for beauty, though beauty often follows, but to avoid air. If poured too quickly, bubbles will rise through the wax and settle near the wick. When burned, the flame will sputter. A candle that sputters is a candle that forgets how to hold silence. He tilts the ladle, and begins. The first mold accepts the wax with ease. The stream is golden, then pale, then nearly invisible as it settles. A thin thread of steam lifts into the air. The second mold takes a moment longer. Its lip catches a little, and Yahiel adjusts his grip. There's no panic, no rush, only small corrections, shaped by familiarity. He has poured like this 1,000 times before. Each pour is the same, and each one is different. The wax shifts with temperature, with season, with age. It reacts to the weather, to wind, to rain, even to the mood of the room. Some days, it glides. Other days, it resists. Today, it listens. He fills the final mold and exhales, then sets the ladle aside, rests his hands on the bench, and waits. Waiting is part of the craft. Wax cannot be hurried. It must cool at its own pace, finding stillness slowly from the inside out. If moved too soon, it cracks. If disturbed, it warps. He watches the surface of each mold. What was liquid begins to cloud. From the outer rim, the wax pales to ivory, a soft, slow bloom that grows inward. This, Yahiel thinks, is where patience lives. He turns to the window. Though the shutters are closed, a faint line of light leaks through the narrow gap between the boards, a gray light, muted and uncertain. Outside, the rain still falls. He can tell it's heavier now. The air in the shop has changed. The scent of damp stone has drifted in through the cracks in the wood, mixing with the warmth of wax and fire. It is not unpleasant. It is grounding. Yahiel returns to the hearth. He refills the kettle and pours another cup of tea, this time adding a sprig of dried mint. The steam curls upward again, brushing past his cheek like an old friend. He takes the cup back to the bench and sits on the stool beside the molds. He does not speak. There is no one to hear, but even if there were, he would say little. This hour, the pouring hour, is not for conversation. It is for observation. The molds are beginning to cool more visibly now. A slight contraction at the edges. A faint dip where the center pulls inward. The candles are forming, not just in shape, but in essence. This, he knows, is the true work. Not the melting, not the trimming, but the moment when something begins to become itself. Not wax. Not yet a candle. A pause in between. He thinks of his uncle again. Of the way he used to describe the craft. A candle is not a thing, he'd said once, it's a moment that hasn't happened yet. Yahiel hadn't understood then. He had wanted to ask, what moment? But he didn't. And now, years later, he finds himself answering silently. The moment of light, the first breath of flame, the stillness it creates, the warmth it offers, the quiet it keeps. He takes another sip of tea. The mint has steeped. It tastes sharper now. More awake. The rain shifts again. A breeze rises through the alley, rattling a loose shutter across the way. A cart rolls by, its wheels muffled by the wet street. Somewhere, faint and distant, a bell rings, not from a church, but from a market stall opening late. Yahiel listens, then returns his gaze to the molds. Still too warm to remove the candles. But almost. He stands again, places his cup near the hearth. He does not feel tired, but he feels the morning deepening. Like wax in a mold. Like rain in the cracks of stone. Like silence settling around flame. The candles are nearly ready. He will wait just a little longer. There is no need to rush. Not in weather like this. Not in a life made of wax and time. The candles have cooled. Yahiel knows before touching them. He sees it in the way the wax has drawn back ever so slightly from the edge of each mold. The tops have flattened, faintly dulled. No more shine, no shimmer of heat. The room smells of quiet work, beeswax and iron, rain and mint, warmth and rest. He wipes his hands on a cloth. Then, slowly, begins. He turns the first mold on its side. It is cool to the touch. The weight in his hands is reassuring, dense, balanced, familiar. He eases the metal apart with care, working the seam open without force. A small sigh of release as the two halves part. Inside, a perfect taper. Almost. He lifts it free and turns it slowly in the light. It has formed well, smooth, clean, even. But along the base, there's a faint bubble, no larger than a lentil. Not a flaw, exactly. Just a reminder. Wax never forgets how it was poured. Even the slightest change in speed, the tiniest shift in temperature, leaves its trace. He sets the candle on the bench, then opens the second mold. This one holds better, no air pocket, but a slight curve to the wick. It tilts a little near the top, drawn that way as it cooled. He smiles faintly. No two are ever truly the same. Each taper holds the memory of its making. He places the second beside the first, then opens the third. This one is nearly perfect. He turns it slowly, running a finger along the wax. No visible marks. But he knows, even in perfection, the candle has a story. Perhaps the wax was older, or the mold slightly warmer. Perhaps it was stirred just once more than the others. Perhaps it cooled a second slower. Each of these things lives inside the wax now. Yahiel does not correct them. He does not hide them. He simply knows them. He lines the tapers on a strip of linen and wraps them loosely. They will sit for a while, a few hours, maybe a day, to finish setting from within. Candles, like memories, require time to harden fully. As he folds the linen, his gaze lifts slightly, toward the shelf above the fire, where his small notebook sits. He reaches for it, opens it, flips through a few soft pages until he finds what he was half remembering, a note, scribbled 3 weeks past, in careful script. For Madame Troilette, 6 tall tapers, natural wax. To be picked up when it rains. Paid in advance. He stares at the line. The request had seemed odd at the time. When it rains. Not a date. Not a season. Just weather. But today, it rains. And somehow, the memory of her soft-spoken order, her small smile, and her insistence on waiting for a gray sky, it all comes back. Yahiel smiles. He unwraps a few older tapers, ones made a week before, already cured and ready, and begins selecting. They must be dry, but not dusty, tall, but not too proud. He runs his fingers along each one, checking for warps, for blemishes, for rough edges along the base. One is a touch too wide. He sets it aside. Another has a wick frayed at the end. He trims it gently. He gathers 6, just right, and wraps them in linen. Then slips the package into a waxed cloth, folds it twice, and ties it with twine. It feels light in his hands, but balanced. Ready. He sets the bundle on the table near the door. He does not expect Madame Troilette today. She may not come, but the candles will wait for her. She asked for them under rain, and the rain is here. That is enough. He turns back to the new tapers, the ones poured this morning. Their imperfections already familiar. Their presence already known. He finds himself tracing the same shape with his eyes, the slight tilt of the wick, the tiny air bubble, the smooth curve at the center. Small signs. Like footprints in snow. And he thinks, not for the first time, how strange it is to make things meant to vanish, to craft for disappearance, to shape what will be flame. The rain picks up outside. A soft tapping becomes a steady rhythm. Drops fall from the eaves in thicker threads now, dripping into puddles in the alley. A faint stream runs toward the drain near the door. He moves to the window, cracks the shutter slightly. The street beyond is muted, gray and quiet, with only the occasional figure passing beneath umbrellas or hoods. A woman with a basket. A boy with a wrapped parcel. A dog trotting beneath a wagon. No Madame Troilette yet, but the day is young, and the sky is full. He turns back to the workbench. The molds are empty now, but not finished. He begins wiping them clean. The cloth is warm from his hand. The rain keeps falling. The morning stretches on. And Yahiel, in the middle of it all, carries on, pouring, unmolding, remembering, like the weather itself. Steady, necessary, quiet. The rain has softened again. No longer a steady drumbeat on the shutters, but a fine misting sound, like parchment being turned gently in a quiet room. The kind of rain that lingers, as if unsure whether to stay or drift away unnoticed. Yahiel finishes drying the molds. He stacks them on the upper shelf, one atop the other with thin cloth squares in between, to keep them from scratching, or clanging, or forgetting their place. The warmth from the hearth still reaches the workbench, curling gently around his sleeves. Outside, the light remains gray and low. He checks the drying rack. The new candles, poured just hours ago, now stand upright, their shapes more certain. Still soft at the core, but steady enough to rest without support. He turns each one gently, giving them air, adjusting their position so they cool evenly. This, too, is a kind of care. Not grand, not clever, just present. He is wiping his hands on a rag when he hears it. Not a knock, not a call. Just the faintest click of something placed at the door. He freezes, listens. Nothing follows. Only the hush of the rain. He steps to the door, opens it carefully, and finds a box. It's small, no larger than a baker's loaf, wrapped in waxed cloth and tied with rough twine. A folded slip of parchment is tucked beneath the string. Yahiel looks down the alley. No figure in sight, no footsteps retreating, only the damp stillness of a city wrapped in rain. He lifts the parcel gently, brushes a bead of water from the twine, and carries it inside. He sets it on the workbench, unties it. The cloth is thick, carefully wrapped, with corners folded to shield from rain. Someone packed this with care, not haste. He unfolds the parchment note. The handwriting is broad and uneven. A familiar scrawl. Yahiel, this came from a merchant bound for Lyon. Said it was a blend they use in the high valleys, more resin than wax, but it burns clean. Thought of you. Perhaps it's worth a pour. Send word if it's useful. J. His cousin, Jules, half candlemaker, half trader. Always sending oddments and curiosities, a spool of lavender-dyed wick last summer, a piece of volcanic stone in spring, and once, memorably, a beeswax candle molded to look like a fig. Yahiel smiles. He opens the box. Inside, pale yellow wax, rough cut in uneven chunks. Not soft like beeswax, harder, glossier. It smells different, sweet, but sharper. Not floral, more like pine, or sap, or something between wood and air. He breaks off a piece with his fingers. It resists at first, then snaps. Beneath the surface, the wax is almost translucent. He holds it near the hearthlight, turns it slowly. It catches light in strange ways. Not sparkling. Not dull. Just, uncertain. He places it in a small pan, separate from his beeswax, and sets it above the embers. He does not rush. The wax will melt when it's ready, and he will wait, as always. While it warms, he rereads the note. No instructions, no claims, just curiosity. An offering, not a demand. He folds the paper and sets it on the shelf with the others, a small collection of scrawled thoughts and shared craft, each one a moment of quiet between distant hands. He checks the pan. The wax is beginning to soften at the edges, turning from firm to glossy, then folding in on itself. It melts more slowly than beeswax, thicker in its movements, more deliberate. The scent rises. It's stronger now, not overwhelming, but sharp in the nose. A clean smell. Resin. Wood smoke. Something that lingers behind thought. He stirs once. The wax flows like honey in winter. He will not pour today. Not yet. New wax deserves respect. He must learn it first. He removes the pan from the heat and lets it rest. Beside him, the rain has quieted again. It is barely more than a breath now, a presence, not a sound. He places the wax in a small jar, labels it with ink, Valley Resin Blend. Below that, Jules, Rain Day, Midsummer. The label matters less than the moment. This is not just an experiment. It is a pause in the rhythm, an invitation to shift. He returns to the drying rack. The tapers are firm now, still young, but stable. He brushes his hand lightly across them, fingertips grazing wax. Each one a record of this day, this weather, this quiet. And now, beside them, sits a jar of something new, something unshaped, something waiting. He looks toward the window. The clouds are beginning to thin. A patch of lighter gray appears between two rooftops. The city has not changed, but the air has. And Yahiel, with resin in his jar and rain still on his doorstep, feels something like a turning page. Not the end of anything, just a different kind of light, waiting to be poured. The rain is ending, not all at once, but slowly, like a sigh. The sky lightens by degrees. The gray thins into a soft silver, and beneath the eaves, water drips more slowly. No longer a rhythm. Just an echo. Yahiel stands at the door. He watches the street, quiet and rinsed. Cobblestones glisten in the fading light, and the scent of wet stone rises from the alley, earthy, clean, familiar. A dog shakes itself dry in the distance. A cart rattles past, the wheels leaving thin streaks in the shallow puddles. Inside, the fire burns low. The molds are stacked. The drying rack is full. The jar of resin wax sits sealed beside the window. The day has been full, but not heavy. It has passed like wax poured and cooled, shaped by time, not effort. He begins to tidy the bench. Not quickly. Not for order's sake. Just as a final motion of care. He folds the cloths. Brushes crumbs of wax into a small tin. Trims one stray wick from the edge of a candle and sets it aside for tomorrow's fire starting. He moves like someone who knows the pace of endings. Soft. Even. No sharp corners. As he turns to the hearth, he catches sight of the linen-wrapped bundle near the door. Madame Troilette never came. He lifts the package, considers untying it, then stops. Perhaps tomorrow. Rain may fall again. And if not, the candles will wait. They are good at that. He snuffs the last taper near the bench. Smoke curls gently in the dim room, a pale thread that drifts upward before vanishing into the rafters. He stands in the quiet that follows, hands folded, thinking not of tasks undone or hours lost, but of the slow shape of the day, the feel of wax beneath the fingers, the sound of rain beside the work, and how, even in silence, the candles carry on. Each one holds a different weather. Some are smooth and bright, poured on clear days, when the air is dry and the light crisp. Others cool with shadows in them, shaped by clouds, by memory, by the hush of distant thoughts. Today's candles carry the sound of rain. They will burn gently, he knows. They will remember. He walks to the stairs, glances once more at the bench, the fire, the folded note from Jules. Then climbs to the loft. The quilt waits, and with it, the promise of sleep. Outside, the sky shifts toward dusk. And inside, in the cooling wax and quiet tools, the last breath of the rain still lingers, calm, small, and complete. The knock is soft, not urgent, not sharp. Just present, like a hand placed gently on the shoulder of sleep. Yahiel opens his eyes. Darkness surrounds him. The loft is cool, the hearth below long since faded. The window shutters glow faintly with the blue-gray hint of earliest dawn, but the world is still hours from waking. The knock comes again, 2 gentle taps. Then nothing. He sits up slowly, pulling the quilt around his shoulders. In the hush of the room, his breath sounds loud. He slides his feet to the floor, listening to the familiar creak of the loft boards as he moves. The air smells of cooling wax and old ash. Down below, another tap. Yahiel lights no lantern. Instead, he descends in the half-light, the pale, silvery dark that belongs to the hour between night and morning. He opens the door a crack. A figure stands in the alley, hood drawn low, holding a cloth-wrapped parcel against their chest. Rain has passed. The stones beneath their feet glisten, and the air carries the faint scent of wet herbs and smoke. The figure lowers their hood. It is Madame Leonie, the midwife, older than Yahiel by perhaps 20 years. Her hair is bound in a scarf, her cheeks wind-bitten and damp. She does not speak immediately. Her eyes meet his with quiet purpose. "I'm sorry," she says, voice barely above the air. "I wouldn't come unless." He raises a hand. "No need," he murmurs. "Come in." Inside, the shop feels warmer by contrast. Yahiel gestures toward the stool beside the hearth. Leonie sits, her parcel resting in her lap. She does not remove her cloak. "It's for a vigil," she says. "A little girl on Rue de Trois Ports. She won't make the sunrise." Yahiel nods once. She reaches into her cloth bundle and removes a worn coin purse. But he steps past her and begins gathering what he needs without a word. She hesitates, then sets the purse quietly on the bench. He moves in silence. No fire, the warmth of the hour does not call for it. Instead, he selects a taper from the drawer near the workbench, one poured 3 weeks ago, steady and pale. Then, after a pause, he takes one of the blue wicked candles from the box beneath the bench. The ones his uncle had left. The ones marked for remembrance. He hasn't burned one yet. Not until now. He turns it slowly in his hands. The wax is firm but smooth. The wick still slightly stiff. He places it gently in a cloth wrap, then hands it to Leonie. She looks at it, and then at him, says nothing, but her silence holds gratitude. She rises, tucks the candle into her cloak, and pauses by the door. "The mother asked for quiet light," she says. "That's all." Yahiel nods again. "Then that's what she'll have." Leonie steps back into the fading night. The alley is still wet. The lamplighter has not yet come. No voices stir. No carts roll. Yahiel stands in the doorway for a long while after she leaves, watching nothing, just listening. Behind him, the shop waits, still dark. Still quiet. But different. Something in it has shifted, not in appearance, but in tone. He walks back to the workbench and places a hand on the edge, then rests in the stillness, and waits. The shop is still. Outside, the night begins to retreat, not with light, but with silence. The deepest dark has passed. But dawn does not yet arrive. It lingers just beyond the sky, hesitant. Waiting. Yahiel moves through the room without sound. He lights a taper, not for work, but for companionship. Its flame is small, steady, casting no more than a shallow glow across the bench. It dances faintly in the draft that slips beneath the door. He sits, fingers resting near the edge of the worktable, not working. Just breathing. The blue wicked candle is gone now, carried gently beneath Leonie's cloak. But its echo remains. He remembers pouring them. A quiet afternoon nearly a year ago. His uncle had brought a jar of blue dye from a church storeroom, a leftover from Easter robes, rich in hue, with a faint scent of violets. They dyed only a few wicks. Not for beauty, not for show, but to mark a purpose. For the last hours, his uncle had said, for sitting beside the dying. A light that doesn't ask questions. Just stays. Yahiel takes another dyed wick from the small tin on the shelf. There are only 5 left. He holds it in his palm, thumb brushing the fibers. Even unlit, it feels different, like it knows what it's for. He prepares a new mold. He will pour one more tonight. Not to sell. Not to store. Just to have ready. The wax warms slowly, the scent of bees and ash returning to the room. The candle he lights on the bench flickers, then steadies. He pours the wax with quiet hands, letting the wick remain slightly off-center, the way his uncle had taught him for vigil lights. It makes the candle burn slower. gentler. Less heat. More time. Outside, a bird calls once in the distance, a reminder that the sky is turning. But Yahiel does not rush. He watches the mold, watches the wax pale and settle, and thinks of the mother, somewhere on Rue de Trois Ports, sitting by her daughter's side, not speaking, not praying, just watching the flame, as it holds the dark at bay, and asks nothing in return. The mold is cooling, the wax has settled, pale and solid beneath the rim. The dyed wick stands still at its center, a single blue line in a world of ivory. Yahiel sets it on the rack to rest. He does not reach for the broom. Does not return to the bench. Instead, he walks to the door, wraps his cloak around his shoulders, and steps outside. The sky is beginning to change, not with color, not yet, but with softness. The stars are fading, one by one, not disappearing but dimming slowly, like eyes closing. Overhead, the dark has lifted just enough to make the rooftops visible in outline. The city is not awake, but it is no longer asleep. He walks down the alley, slowly, with no direction in mind. His boots press gently into puddles that glisten with lamp reflections. Chimneys exhale pale steam into the sky. Somewhere, in the distance, a gate creaks. A window opens. Then closes. He turns left, then right, following nothing, only the rhythm of his breath, and the quiet inside him. Paris at this hour is different. It holds its breath, as if reluctant to speak aloud, unsure of what the new day might bring. Yahiel passes shuttered doors, their hinges damp with rain. He sees footprints in the mud. A thin trail of smoke from a baker's flue. A cat curled beneath a bench, ears twitching. There are no greetings, no wagons. No coins changing hands, just the city as it is, bare, unlit, honest. He breathes in the stillness, and walks on. Eventually, he reaches a small bridge near the Seine. The river below is dark and wide, but it carries the sky's reflection, a bruised silver, soft and shifting. A lantern burns at the far end of the bridge, its flame swaying gently in the early breeze. He rests a hand on the damp stone wall and looks out across the water. He thinks of the candle, the one now burning in a small room just a few streets away, its light barely flickering. Its wax slowly lowering, a soft flame, no brighter than a breath. He closes his eyes, not in weariness, but in reverence. The world is made of these moments, he thinks, quiet things no one sees. A mother sitting in vigil, a child slipping silently into sleep, a candle burning low beside them, holding the dark with dignity. Not all light is meant to shine loudly, some is meant to keep watch. A breeze rises from the river, lifting the edge of his cloak. The eastern sky begins to warm, a faint hint of rose behind the clouds. No sun yet. No gold. Just the idea of light. He stands a moment longer, then turns back the way he came. By the time he returns to the shop, the alley has changed. A window is open now on the second floor. Someone sweeps their doorstep in silence. A dog trots past, pausing only briefly to sniff a broken crate. The city is beginning to breathe again. Inside, the shop feels changed. The candle he lit hours ago has burned nearly to its base. Its wax pools quietly at the rim of the holder. He watches it for a moment, then gently pinches the wick with a bit of damp cloth, extinguishing it. Smoke rises, soft, gray, curling toward the ceiling. He stands still, watching it fade. On the rack, the new vigil candle rests. It is pale and simple, with a single thread of blue at its heart. Yahiel does not label it. He does not wrap it. He simply leaves it where it is, ready, for whenever it is needed. The world outside continues to lighten. Birds begin to call. Bread ovens creak open. A cart clatters faintly on a distant street. But here, inside the candlemaker's shop, everything remains slow, still, soft, and in that stillness, the final hours of night find their rest. The morning has arrived, soft and gray. Yahiel moves to the windows, loosens the latch, and opens the shutters with care. Light spills into the room, not bright, but gentle, filtered through passing clouds. Dust motes stir in the air like drifting ash. The city is fully awake now. Footsteps echo. A market bell rings. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs. Madame Virette from next door passes with her basket and nods through the open door. Yahiel nods back. No words, only a look that says you are seen. He returns to the bench and smooths the cloths. Checks the molds. Sets aside the cured vigil candle. It feels heavier than it is. The day is simple. Orders to fill, wax to pour. But something of the night remains. A quietness, held gently. He does not try to shake it. He simply continues. That evening, as dusk returns, Yahiel lights a candle. Not for work, not for need, just for memory. He chooses one with an old, twisted wick, a taper from months ago, slightly lopsided, but true. The flame catches quickly and burns low, steady, soft. He places it near the window and watches it flicker against the glass. Outside, the city dims. Lamps glow. Smoke rises from rooftops. He thinks of the candle he gave to Leonie. By now, it is likely gone, melted into silence. But its light remains, not in wax, not in wick, but in the stillness it kept, the breath it shared, and the way it stayed. The final chapter opens in the late afternoon, a few days after the vigil. Rain has not returned, but the sky holds the same muted gray as before, soft, reflective, familiar. Yahiel moves slowly through his shop, sleeves rolled, hands dusted with wax and soot. There is no great task today. Only the quiet rhythm of closure. He polishes the copper pot, empties the ash drawer by the hearth, and lines up the molds to inspect for scratches and wear. He sharpens his wick trimming knife, oils the drawer hinges, and dusts the corners where time gathers. As he works, he pauses often, not out of fatigue, but in reverence. Each tool, each candle, carries the echo of days past, the warmth of the fire, the rain's hush, the candle lit for a child's final night. These are not memories to cling to, but to gently acknowledge. Yahiel lights one taper in the window as the sun fades, not to brighten the room, but to mark the turning of hours. Evening settles around him. He prepares a light meal, sweeps the floor one last time, and closes the ledger without writing. No words are needed. The silence of the room is full. Outside, Paris quiets into dusk. Inside, the shop is clean, still, and at rest. Candles remain, waiting to be lit. Ash rests in the hearth, proof of the fire that was. And Yahiel, with sleeves rolled and eyes soft, takes one final breath, not of ending, but of continuation. The work never ends. But for now, it is enough.